Welcome to the third part and last part of this 3-video series guide about the Loremaster. And today in this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of tips and tricks for like PvP, maybe some PvE as well, how I play Loremaster that maybe can help you a bit to more efficiently play this class. So enjoy and have fun. So the first trick I want to show you is in this build, red-yellow. Important here is stun duration and grace period. This will enhance not just your stuns as you can see, but also the grace period, which is basically on top of the regular days and roots. When someone takes damage, it adds another 3 seconds of root or days. So it's like making a daze like a stun basically, and the root's like, yeah, a root in place even after they're taking damage. So there's one combo how you can perma-lock down a bunch of NPCs. This works in PvE, works in PvP, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, what you need is this build for that. You need ideally also AoE targets on your book or your weapon to just do that on more targets. There's this entire combo, you can also nuke them with like Nature's Fury, with Lightning Storm, you can stack up Embers. You will also use the End for a stun. Yeah, it's usually what I do in 3-mans in PvE, so let's just pull a bunch of these cows here to demonstrate that. And therefore, we go for like, I don't know, 7 cows or something. The first thing in that stun, in that CC rotation is, you want to start with Pain Flare. This will just daze them. You can then in that time maybe debuff them a bit. I don't know, Wind Lore, you can start to put your Ember in Nature's Fury. And after that, you will go with the End. The End will stun them for 8 seconds, so that gives you even more time to do anything about them. You're gonna use Call to Volar. This will reset your Bane Flare, and as soon as the stun ends, you're gonna Bane Flare them again. Like this. So now they basically dazed again. They're now in the grace period. And after the grace period is out and they get back to life, you can then Stormlord them for an additional like 5 seconds stun. In total, this can lock down a group of 9 enemies up to like 20 seconds. And during these 20 seconds, your entire party can do damage, including yourself. So this is in PvE very broken for like tier 5 3-man dungeons. Because when you have a tank, you can just pull like a bunch of NPCs. You can even pull above 9, you know, like you lock down 9 and the tank just tanks with like maybe a cooldown. And in the meantime, you can do all your big AoE skills and just nuke them away while they don't do anything to the tank or you, because you would probably get aggro if they were not stunned or something. Another trick is just a general thing how Loremaster really should be played. So Loremaster, you know, has on the one side a lot of dot damage, which is quite strong. It's the main damage source in like a DPS meter. But on the other side, Loremaster is also rich in very like bursty damage skills with high cooldowns. You know, like we have Nature's Fury in red, we have Lightning Storm, we have Ends Go to War. You can see those skills have quite a high cooldown. In order to use those effectively, you should always pair them with a bunch of debuffs on the target and buffs on yourself. Otherwise, it is just a waste to use them. In PvP, that means you should start to like stacking up Wind Lore. Wind Lore, you know, you can stack up to 3 tiers. If you use it 3 times in a row without it expiring, it stacks up 3 times to tier 3, increasing incoming damage to 5%. So this is one thing you should do in a fight. Stack up incoming damage, Wind Lore, at least have 1 Wind Lore on the target always. The second thing that you should try to do is keep the target in tar. The tar applies minor anti-buff, decreases tactical mitigation and physical mitigation. On the top of that, you have Ancient Craft. Oops. You have Ancient Craft that reduces the mitigation by another 3% on the target. This is at the moment most you can do. You can still also do the Raven debuff. The problem with that is it's sometimes not very wise to swap your pet in a fight if the pet is not getting touched. Anyway, this is all debuffs you can put on the target. Then what you can do to buff yourself up usually is Inner Flame, and this is like the last thing you do before you pull out those big skills. You're gonna Inner Flame yourself up. This will increase your fire and lightning time damage, and this is the time when you start to use your big skills. This will maximize their damage potential, also the dots that they apply, and this is how you use the skills to get the best damage out of them. Maybe against the war leader, not the biggest, but yeah, just don't throw those skills in. Use them with debuffs and buffs. Also makes the dots way stronger, especially the Gurt dot will be huge on the target. There's one thing I want to show you, it's called the flanked mechanic. So every time a pet hits a target, it has a chance to apply something called the flanked debuff. We're just gonna wait now until this happens. It's quite RNG. All I know is that certain pets like Bear have a higher chance to trigger it, but there isn't really a system to it, to trigger it. The only way how you can trigger it for sure is with the Spirit pet, and then using this skill here, Flashing Flank. This will apply the flank debuff on the target. Looks like this. When you use Wizard Fire, it will give you for 10 seconds a damage over time buff. This is sometimes quite important to use before you use the Gurt. It will just make your Gurt dot stronger, and you know, Gurt dots are quite important, you know. So for this trick, I'm gonna show you how you can get a spider out of Burrow with the skill Wisdom of Counsel. Wisdom of Counsel has a 25% chance to apply a stun whenever you get or receive damage. So what you need to do when you fight the spider will, you know, usually dot you. Has a lot of dots, you know, and they are like basically they can proc the stun. Now the thing is, when the spider does damage on you and burrows, you can use Wisdom of the Council. It eventually puts a stun on her and puts her into stun and gets her out of burrow. So that's how you can interrupt the burrow from a spider. The next trick I'm going to show you is, well, it's quite broken, but I mean, it has to be shown. So as a Loremaster, you have two sources of reflect damage, and this is really reflect on any damage you take. You have this one, Wisdom of Counsel, this is probably the strongest one. When you have this up for 10 seconds, almost every hit you take reflects 2770 light damage back to the targets, and this is unfiltered, unmitigated damage. So if a Reaver just starts hitting you, every time a damage number pops in you with a 50% chance, you just straight up get 2.7k damage. On top of that, you also have the Fire Shield, which, okay, I'm gonna take here. You have the Fire Shield, and that also is around 900 damage, and these two numbers add together with the damage, so you will then reflect with Fire Shield up and Wisdom of the Council up for every hit around 3600 damage. This is what we're gonna demonstrate now. So I just gave him the commands to like just build up his damage on me. Like Reaver, it's very effective against Reaver because Reaver does a lot of hits. When they have auto attack on, like every auto attack, every number is like sometimes an auto attack. So I'm gonna proc now Fire Shield. This is the Fire Shield. And now I'm gonna pull out the Wisdom of the Council. He gets stunned. And this 3688 damage, this is the combined reflect damage from Fire Shield and Wisdom of the Council. And yeah, that thing just did 200k damage on him in like 10 seconds, as you can see. It's like very bursty, it's very broken, to be honest. Something that should be fixed, like the Fire Shield reflect is fine, but the Wisdom of the Council, man, that just should not be, to be honest. Like it's too strong. One tip, and this is quite an important one. So the main source of damage for a Loremaster in red, also in blue to be honest, is your Ember, especially when you have it stacked at the 4th tier. Now the thing is, how the dot works on this is not very trivial, and I did a lot of testing to really understand how this dot works, but what I can show you now with this tip is the following. The Ember damage, if you stack it up, you know, it goes up, the damage. We can, okay. I should have used that first. But we're just gonna stack up now the Ember to tier 4. The Ember damage is defined by the first Ember you apply on the target with the current damage modifiers you have. Outgoing damage modifiers. Right now, if I stack a tier 4 Ember without any damage modifiers, I will end up with this range of damage now on my gear and etc, right? Now we're just gonna wait until the dot, the ember runs out, and then I will redo it with a damage modifier on myself. Now we're gonna apply the ember with the inner flame buff. The inner flame buff gives me a outgoing damage increase for fire and lightning damage by 18%. And just to make my point clear, I'm just gonna apply the first ember, and this ember is now defining all the other embers, the second, the third, and the fourth tier. I'm just gonna stack that up now, and then we're gonna compare with the damage we had before. Now the damage ran out. That doesn't really matter at this point anymore. The damage is defined. And we can see now that the damage went up to like 31k from 28k. Now the thing is, it doesn't really matter anymore how you buff yourself up now. Like you can get another inner flame. It will not change the ember damage. The ember damage is now defined with the inner flame buff after applying the first dot, the first ember on the target. So if I now get this ember up again to tier 4, it will have the exact same damage. So as you can see, this is the exact same damage. There has not been any decrease, as you would expect, because we don't have this buff anymore on us. Now we do the other way around. Now we're going to wait until it's back on tier 3, and now we're going to use Inner Flame, and now we're going to show you that the Ember damage will not be stronger, because even with the buff, it will not be higher. It's already defined by the start. So now we have the Inner Flame buff, 18% fire type damage. We're going to apply the Ember again to tier 4, and as you can see, the damage is still the same. So the damage is really defined by the very first Ember you throw at your target. The only way to reset the damage is by just waiting until all 4 tiers of Ember have been depleted, and then you can start a new one. That being said, like with this knowledge now, if you want to maximize your Ember chain damage, you have to maximize your outgoing damage before you use the first Ember on the target. On Loremaster, you have quite a few ways to do that. You have Inner Flame, as I showed you. You have also the flanked buff, like if you put a flanked on the target, you use your Wizard Fire, you get another 10% damage over time buff. You also have in blue, for example, if your pet gets a crit, you get a 20% damage buff. And also you have here in red, actually have this in this build, if you use your Staff Strike, it will give you this buff here, Fire type damage. If you combine this with Inner Flame, with the flanked buff that I just showed you, and even if you have maybe that blue buff, then you can create an Ember which does like, I don't know, up to 60% more damage than a regular one. One other tip I want to show you is the movement reduction with the tar. You have a 50% slow, as you can see here, but there's a problem with it. If you fight like a Reaver, in that case a War Leader, if they cleanse the movement duration, the movement reduction inside the tar, they can move with their regular speed, as you can see. He just purged and he can now basically run as he wants. In order to counter that, you want to always fight, in that case a Reaver or also a Spider, you want to guide them outside the tar, like this. Like they will chase you, they will try to melee you, and you just guide them back in the tar, it will reapply the slow on them. And you do that basically all the time until they fully depleted from their movement reduction cleanses. The Reaver, unfortunately, that's quite a lot, but usually you can also get rid of them. Another tip that I could give you is the cleanse skill. On Loremaster, you have a pretty strong cleanse called Knowledge of Cures. It removes 3 effects from you, and you should always use this when you actually have 3 effects on you. Unless there is an effect that you really need to get rid of. The thing is, like, this is a cost, you know, even though the cost duration is quite low, I usually pair this with this craftable Loremaster item. It makes your next induction not being interrupted. Sometimes it's very important when you spar a Reaver in the first time you cleanse that you use this, because otherwise, if they interrupt your cleanse, usually you do this when you have the red dot from the Reaver on you. Yeah, if you cannot cleanse that dot, that's like a 300k damage in you by the Reaver. So you should always make sure that this Knowledge of Cures goes through on you. At least the first one in the fight. Here's also a trick or like a tip on how to use pets. In general, you want to play with the Bog Lurker in a way that the Bog Lurker somehow stands on the sideline and just starts to like attack whatever you fight. Like, you know, Bog Lurker damage is quite strong. It's not the strongest pet, but, you know, if it can just sit there on the sideline, it will provide you usually with around 2 to 3k DPS, depending on what you're attacking. So basically the Bog Lurker is now just hitting the target with auto attacks, and the damage it does that way, it's around 2.5k, depending on what you're attacking. So you can just see it as some dot that you apply on the target that just ticks with, in that case, like 4000 damage. Sometimes you will encounter a creep, like creeps like reavers or spiders. They will try to kill your pet. They do that because, first of all, well, the damage is not that low that the pet provides. At the same time also, if they succeed in killing the pet, they will get unlocked a few more skills to use. Reaver, for example, has the skills like procs, they call it, like a self heal or a attack duration buff, or like an insane like incoming damage buff. It removes also a bunch of like cleanse a bunch of buffs on you. So in order for this not to happen, when they try to attack your pet, always dismiss it before it dies. Otherwise, you just donate them a free proc. If you fight someone like this that actually goes for your pets, you can still make use of the pet damage, but in that case, I would not use the Bog Lurk, because as soon as you summon it, a good Reaver, a good Spider will just spray an AoE dot on the Bog Lurk, and the Bog Lurker will die. What you can do instead is use the links as some sort of additional damage skill. It will not obviously do as much damage as the Bog Lurker, but just summoning the pet, like the links, making it use his skills out of stealth and maybe a few auto attacks, will also provide you with like some okay damage. We're speaking here of 40-50k. And the good thing is you can just resummon it. It will just redo it every time you resummon it. So if you're like out of skills, happens quite often on Loremaster, you can play with this around. You just summon your links. Links will do a few hits. Just make sure it doesn't die to some AoE. Pet unfortunately die like super fast in PvP at the moment, so you really need to be faster to dismiss it. The next trick is one of the things that probably about Loremaster is quite tedious, and that's the fact that after each cast, so like the cast bar is full, you have an animation, and that kind of locks you on the spot, like you can't move during this animation. That's, you know, that's honestly one of the things that I don't personally like about Loremaster. You only have a few skills that you can do while walking, and those are all like instant casts, you know, like stuff that doesn't require an induction. Usually, if there's an induction, you can't move for the entirety of the casts, or in that case, the attack animation. This is sometimes a problem. For example, you do PvE, you're gonna do a cast and the fucking puddle spawns below you. You wanna get out of the puddle, and yeah, well, you have to basically wait until the animation is done to move out. There's one way to free yourself out of this animation, and it is done with animation cutting that we also know from other classes. In Lotro, you have a few skills which are tagged as immediate, and their property is that you can immediately use them whenever you have already something going on. They can be an induction bar, they can be an animation. If you use an immediate skill, the current thing gets stopped, and you know, the effect, whatever it is, will be executed, but it will then be replaced instantly by that immediate skill. In that case, on Loremaster, if you use an immediate during a animation, and make sure that the induction bar is full, otherwise you're just gonna interrupt your own cast, make sure that you actually, during the animation, you can free yourself from such an animation and walk around. And this is sometimes very useful also in PvP when, I don't know, like, you just need to move, you just need to do a cast and you still need to kite or something. And this is when you should use your immediate skills. There's a few prominent skills that I personally like to immediate. I mean, rarely I use this in PvE. In PvE I use it quite a lot. It's the Ants Go to War. Like, the Ants Go to War has like a... Man, it has like a 2-second animation. You just stand there while the ant stomps your target, and you can't do anything. You have to watch during this entire process. Now, with animation cutting, you can move around while the ant does this animation, and it honestly looks kind of cool sometimes, as I can show you now. Use the ant, you use your blinding flash, and you can move around while the ant is doing all the animation. Like, another skill that has for me personally, quite a long animation is the Frost Lore. Like, this is Frost Lore. Like, you just wiggle your staff around for 2 seconds, applying a debuff. This is something I usually cut too, with a Blinding Flash. Like, I just cut to the animation, basically, to use the next spell. This is one thing to cut. Another thing I also cut sometimes is Lightning Strike, I would say. Lightning Storm I cut quite a lot. And we already said, Frost Lore I cut quite often. Also sometimes I cut skills that I just want to have an immediate response, like has an effect. For example, this one, Tar, I sometimes cut because the effect will just go out much faster. Like sometimes you just need the Tar on spot in like a second, and immediate cutting will just make this process way faster. But wait, there is more. So this is just immediate cutting. Like what it does, it basically replaces your animation with the animation of the immediate skill. Some immediate skills, like the champ, like Battle Frenzy, is very fast. So you can immediately use after Battle Frenzy, cutting another animation, the next skill. On Loremaster is a bit different because the Blinding Flash animation itself is also quite long. But yeah, there is one way to even cut the animation of an immediate skill. And this is quite technical. And for that, what you need to do is you have to put the immediate skill on 2 buttons that you can press at the same time. In my case, I hammer the buttons like 2-3 times. And what it does is, it will not only cut the animation of the skill you want to cut the animation from, it will also cut the animation of the immediate skill. So basically what happens is, nothing happens. You're just gonna cut the thing you want to cut, like the skill, and then you can immediately use the next skill, if that makes sense. So in that case, what I usually do is, I start with Sticky Gourd. I'm gonna show it now without this thing. So I'm gonna use Sticky Gourd, Blinding Flash, and then I use the Ember. And as you can see, there is some delay in between those 2 induction parts, because I basically do the Gourd cast and the Gourd animation I cut with the Blinding Flash. I do the Blinding Flash animation, and when the Blinding Flash animation is done, then comes the cast of the Ember. Now with, I don't know, people call it macro cutting, like some people actually macro this. They put this on a macro to use it at the same time, but I just use it on Q and R button. If you use it that way, it will look like this. So basically, now I applied the Sticky Gourds and the Ember immediately after. The Blinding Flash animation I cut by just cutting it with Blinding Flash. And that's very advanced, but at some point you kind of figured out the muscle memory, you know, like you have 2 good buttons that you can press at the same time. And this is something you can honestly use on other classes too. So if you learn it on one class, you can usually use it on another class too, because usually every class has immediate skills. Yeah, so I guess we have reached the end of this Loremaster tutorial. If you watched until now, thank you so much for having interest in this video. I know I didn't put much effort into editing it, but man, like the goal has been reached for myself to have a video about this class before it becomes shit. The Loremaster class as it is right now, and has been for, I don't know, the last like decade with some small adjustments, has been always one of my most favorite classes now. Now that I maining it for the past, I don't know, 2 years. It is, yeah, it is quite painful to see that this class will go through a change where its identity will be destroyed. So I'm not really agreeing with this rework. Maybe a lot of people will do, good for them, but for me, I'm not sure if I'm still gonna play it. Maybe I will, but if I will, it probably won't be on the same level of passion. So with that being said, I will bury myself here on this graveyard, and yeah, I had a good time. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I don't know, let's see what we do in this game still, if it will be in here. So thanks, and hope you all enjoyed the Loremaster arc. So thank you, bye bye.